Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a very special guest and a few other guests in the background. We have an evening chatting with Greg Jackson and a few of the other team from Octopus Energy. And I'd like to say hello to you, Greg. How are you?
Hey, very well, thanks. How are you?
Yes, very good, thank you. Very good. Yeah, so we should have YouTube and Facebook going live any second. I can see a few numbers coming in. So throughout the evening, if you have any questions, please chuck it into the chat, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer. Greg said any question is good, so feel free to push the limits with that, and yeah, we'll have a good session. Before we do start, though, I would just like to reference that with all our events for the rest of 2020, we are raising money for Mind, the mental health charity. If you do have some time, please go and check out their website. It's full of great information, and also if you can donate towards their cause, then we have a Just Giving page, justgiving.com/Tesla Owners UK, and then all the money goes to them. So thank you very much. We have 65 people live on YouTube and a few others. So welcome everybody. We'll start now. So Greg, how long have you been doing this stuff?
Well, Octopus Energy, we incorporated almost exactly 5 years ago. So I think we went live to the public in May of 2016. So live for 4.5 years.
Got it. And so am I right in thinking video games programmer, ex-washing powder seller, wannabe motorcycle courier, digital disruptor, investor advisor? Is that sort of a pretty broad scope of you?
You know more about me than most of my mates, but yeah, I think that is pretty full. Although it was less washing powder and more shampoo. I worked for Procter & Gamble for a bit, so you can probably tell.
Good stuff. So most of our members, obviously, we're all Tesla owners, so we know this space fairly well. But we obviously know Octopus primarily for the Tesla tariff, Go, Agile, and I think now Juice, which seems to be a new product. Am I right in thinking Octopus now sort of looking like 5% market share at the moment in the UK, something like that?
Yeah, it's hard to be certain, but I think it might be near a 7 now. But yeah, that kind of scale. So knocking on the door, I think we're number 5 or number 6 in the market now, so kind of one of the big 6, but hopefully not like them.
Yeah, got it. And am I right in thinking that the mission of Octopus is that sole goal of really to decarbonize the grid, get rid of that from both generation and distribution, and use technology really to do that?
Yeah, the planning team here were all from sort of technology background, not an energy background, and I think a bit like the people behind Uber weren't from the cab industry. I think coming from a tech background, we looked at energy really with a perspective that said, by applying technology, we should be able to drive prices down because we're more efficient. But more importantly, we should be able to drive towards a sort of smart, dynamic grid so that we can grab green electrons when they're abundant and use them to today charge people's cars, tomorrow heat their homes.
Got it. And earlier this year, you got a valuation from as a startup hitting unicorn status, as they call it, which actually there's a term within Tesla ownership, which is unicorn status, which is when you buy full self-drive. So it's quite funny that there's that parallel, which means I think you're one of 16 startups in the UK currently with a valuation of £1 billion, thanks to an investment. So how did that come about, that investment?
Yeah, that was from a company called Origin, which is the biggest energy company in Australia. And hats off to them, really. A couple of years ago, they turned up in our office in London. And at the time, we probably only had about 250,000 customers. So we were kind of, relatively small. But they were looking for what they thought the future of energy might look like. We were on a global tour. And I think at the time when the incumbent energy companies here in the UK were largely dismissing challengers like us as being, we were only going to be all right when the market price of energy was falling or something like that. Origin actually had the vision to see that, the future could be tech driven. And it was like that. There used to be an advert on the TV where some people from IBM met a small company and they kind of phoned home and said, "We found them." And the small company "We found them." And it was like that. We got on brilliantly. And I think ever since then, we and they had stayed in touch. And when we were looking for investment, we spoke to 60 odd companies globally. But to be fair, I think Origin were always going to win.
And where was that investment coming from? The interest in the investment, sorry, was it mainly, the Australia. Were they Australian? You said? Was it across Europe as well? What was the?
Yeah, it's pretty much all over the world except the USA, and I think it's really interesting that the US, because it has this kind of you don't really have a competitive market in energy. It's certainly outside of Texas. Europe, the UK, Australia are much more innovative and are really driving consumer-focused change in the energy market. So I think we found kind of interest everywhere, and by the way, it carries on today. Really excitingly, I think many of the world's biggest investors now looking at the energy sector and thinking, the green industrial revolution's on its way. It will be as big as the internet.
Yeah, and one of the questions we've seen a few times is, how can Joe Public, as it were, invest in Octopus? Is there a way for them to do that at the moment?
Sadly not, and it's how flattering is it that people ask that? My own mum asked me, and she's not particularly well off, and I was like, Mum, honestly, I'm not sure. As a financial advisor, I'd suggest a single investment in a small company, but I think the exciting thing is, and I can't promote it in any way, I think under Financial Services Association, but for example, Octopus have Octopus Group, which is kind of the parent company for us, have got listed funds for renewable generation. So increasingly, I think there'll be ways, that's an example, there'll be ways for people to invest in the renewable future. We also work with people like Ripple as well, where you can start investing in wind farms yourself. So, I think the exciting stuff in generation.
So we touched briefly on some other countries and their sort of interest in Octopus. What are some of the things that you maybe have seen in other countries that haven't quite transitioned yet to the UK, or are actually restricted from doing so, maybe by legislation or something like that? Is there anything you can maybe touch on there?
I think first of all, look, the UK should be really proud. We're actually a world leader in kind of renewables at scale. I was at a conference in Norway sort of last October, and blown away that Scandinavians were saying, "Hey, Britain, how are you doing so well in renewables?" So I think first of all we should be proud with that. But I think there's a couple of interesting little things. So I don't know whether people know this, but in the UK, for example, we have something called the capacity market. That means everybody's electricity bill has a levy on it, which pays fossil fuel companies to be on standby, to kind of top up with gas or even coal if we're short of electricity. And Australia, for example, has now opened up to enable things like domestic storage, power walls, or even car batteries to be part of that network. So instead of paying fossil fuel companies just to be standing by, we could be paying people to be ready to use less energy or even discharge batteries onto the grid. So I think there's a couple of things we can learn about how to democratize to a greater degree our energy grid. So the UK is doing well, but we're still like a centrally planned system. It's still the case that the government decides how much and what kind of generation we'll have where. And I think we've got to change that,
And do you think that's just down to something like education, or is that like a government policy, or is it a mix of all of those?
It's fascinating, isn't it? I think it's comes from it's a history that energy used to be nationalized, and so you had a central planning function. But in energy, we still have the kind of case of you've got this big wasteful capacity market. You've got National Grid turning off wind farms when we've got high renewables on the grid, just putting that electricity to waste. It reminds me a bit of the look, I'm 49, so I remember the late 70s, early 80s when you had things like the European Butter Mountain or Wine Lake or whatever. And I think we're still at that stage in electricity, and we now really need to decarbonize cheaply. We really need the government to trust that companies and investors can deliver a cheaper, better solution faster. So I hope we're on the verge of that.
And can you touch on some of the struggles from right at the beginning to where you are today? Some of those standout points that have really been difficult for you as a company, and also you as a CEO.
Yeah. You know what? It's so funny. I mean, look, it's a great joy to be here. I've been a Tesla owner for a long time, and not as long as many members. But I think the only really significant pain in our business is smart meters. They're getting better all the time, but we're the only company that created products that make people really, really want smart meters. And I think that really tests the limits of the kind of rollout. There's no criticism of the government in this. I mean, it was all defined more than a decade ago, I think. But smart meters probably account for, smart tariffs account for a single-digit percentage of our customers, but maybe a double-digit percent of all of the consumer dissatisfaction and complaints. By the way, it's still small overall. Like, we've got the happiest customers in energy, I think, certainly at scale. But of everything, that's the most intractable. And maybe we'll get into that later. But there's a lot of kind of systems issues that are still being ironed out there. That's probably the only significant thing. The other, just for me as a CEO, is look, we are now a global business, and I've discovered there's not an hour of the day when one of our companies isn't operating, and we haven't yet worked out how to do that without staying up all night sometimes.
Fair enough. So Octopus, I believe was it 2018 and 2019 was recommended provider by Which. How important do you think those accolades are to the business?
Yeah, look, I think it's been incredibly helpful for us. We've got a team here. First of all, we've got technology, which, we came from a tech background, and from the very beginning, we were building a platform to transform energy. Today, it should deliver a dramatically more efficient business that provides better service. But over, as Tesla owners are at the cutting edge of, it's also paving the way to a smart grid and the decarbonisation here and around the world. I think that enables us to demonstrably provide certainly for vanilla customers, outstanding service compared to kind of what people have traditionally known in energy. We've also got this incredible team of people who work so hard. Time and again, I see the effort they put in to try and delight customers. And so I think those accolades are extremely helpful in letting people who are not yet a customer know what they might expect. By the way, they also put a tremendous onus on us. We've got to deliver in line with those kind of recommendations and awards. So I think every time, I think we've now had 3 years in a row we got the Which Recommended Award. And each year when I get the phone call telling me it's definitely a mixed blessing, because I think, I don't know how we're going to keep it up yet again, but we'll do our best.
And is that purely because of scale? Every time you scale up, you also have to scale your staff and the teams in the back end as well. Is that the primary issue?
No, I think, it's really cool. We've got this incredible operations director, John Paul, who some of you may come across actually. But John arrived with this vision of a different way of doing customer service, and we built the tech to support it. So the way we do customer service, customer operations, is we don't have like loads of different vertical functionalities. You have a multi-skilled people with a platform, Kraken, that gives them access to every aspect of a customer's relationship with us. And then they work in teams of around 10 people. Each of those teams has about 70,000 customers that they look after end to end. They do everything for those customers. What that kind of means is, as we're scaling, we don't have to recruit 27 more people in this role and 5 more in that and 100 more in that. We recruit energy specialists. They go through a standard training program, a couple of weeks of classroom training, and then a couple of months of on-the-job training, and then they're increasingly able to be self-dependent. But then every time we grow another 70,000 customers, we just create a new team. So I think at the moment we're recruiting, 10 to 20 people every week or two. I get to meet them all. I do a session with them when they join the company. We talk about why we set it up and what our mission is. But I think that does make scaling easier for us than it is for most companies.
Got you. Perfect. So we also have joining us Phil Steele. So he's sort of more of what's his exact position?
Future energy evangelist.
Future. Okay. So we actually have another event. I think it's in January, just with him for the really deep technical questions. But you referenced quickly there Kraken. Could you, Phil, give us a bit of information about Kraken and what that is to Joe Public?
Yep. Good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here online. I hope there's not too much background noise with children having dinner this evening. So Kraken is the IT platform that Greg and James Edison and the crew have created from scratch as the complete billing, customer care management platform. Manages all the smart meter data, all the billing goes through it, all the statements are issued through it, and so on. So it's the complete IT system built from the ground up. Quite unusual in the energy industry, but it means that we're doing so many interesting things with tariffs, like the Tesla tariff and the Agile and Go tariff, that some of the viewers will be very familiar with.
Got it. Perfect. And am I right in thinking that piece of software is for your customers, obviously, and your systems, but you also use that in other companies as well? Is that right?
That's correct, Greg. Do you want to talk about that, or shall I take it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've licensed it to Origin, our investors in Australia, to Hanwha, Korean conglomerate who operate also in Australia, to E.ON and npower, one group here in the UK, and there's a bunch of others lined up. So I think collectively there's about 17 million customers licensed onto Kraken now. npower began their transition onto it on March the 23rd this year. And I don't think I'm allowed to say how many customers moved over already, but yeah, it's a very significant number. Good Energy here in the UK, a great renewable business, is also on Kraken. So I was going to say, just for us, I think what it lets us do is, like globally, we've maybe got 10, 15 years to transition the energy system to a decarbonized system. Tech like Kraken will make that cheaper. And the best way we can scale this is by working with, large organizations around the world to get their customers on it fast.
Perfect, cool. So just another shout out, if you have any questions, please pop them into either YouTube or Facebook comments, and we can get to them later on. So what do you think is the coolest Octopus Energy project that maybe hasn't either come to light yet, or actually you've said, the market's not ready for yet? Is there anything you can maybe give an insight into?
Coolest project, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's not yet out there, but I'm really excited about decarbonizing heating. So I think that, if you want to take a complete system view of decarbonization, electric vehicles have been this fantastic complement for renewable generation, because, we can fill the battery when the wind's blowing, sun's shining. The vast majority of the time, you've got enough kind of flexing when you charge to do that. That means that we can do a better job of monetizing green electrons, which should make renewable generation more profitable or more cost effective for investors. So we're going to build more renewable generation, which then means we can start to heat homes more cheaply through electrons. Heat pumps are magic. They generate 2.5 to 4 kilowatt hours of heat for every kilowatt hour of electricity. So you get this fantastic multiplier effect. A gas boiler gives you 0.9 kilowatt hours of heat for every kilowatt hour of gas. So electric vehicles plus heat pumps combined with renewables connected through, whether it be dynamic or time of use tariffs, is the way we can decarbonize society while bringing down, literally cutting the price of energy whilst decarbonizing. So it's the opposite of what we used to be told about, green taxes.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds awesome. What has caused the fluctuations, or what does cause the fluctuations in agile pricing? Can you give a bit more information in that?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing about agile is, we are completely unable to affect its price. It's a formula published on our website, which is just a multiple of the wholesale price and an offset, plus a peak charge between 4 p.m. and 7. That formula hasn't been changed by us since the day we launched it. And so we sit and watch agile prices just as much as everyone else does. But the vast majority of this year, agile has been bonkers cheap. I've been seeing people kind of quoting they've had average electricity prices of 7, 8, 9 pence a kilowatt hour, whereas you won't get less than 13 or 14 on a fixed price tariff in the market. Just recently, just in the last few days, I think we've seen agile prices being pretty high. Although even when we talk about agile being pretty high, it's 16 or 17 per kilowatt hour, right? Obviously higher at peak, but average across the day or weighted average, you might get 17 or 18, which is still cheaper than the energy price cap. I think it's still cheaper than some energy companies are providing normal energy, I think. Now, we take the rough with the smooth. Over a period of time, the point of agile is to help people see what's really going on in the energy generation market. So we get high prices when there's a lot of demand and there's not a lot of wind. That's the number one driver. On top of that, I think, for example, we saw a period when some of our nuclear power stations were decommissioned for maintenance. And you'll see effects when things like large gas stations are down for seasonal cleaning as well.
Oh, yeah, perfect. So we also have Rebecca here, who is Director of Product and Marketing. So we're going to get you on the call as well. Hello, Rebecca. How are you? Oh, I think we might have you muted.
Am I? There we go. Here I
There
am.
we go. All good.
I'm late. I had small children to wrestle into bed, but I have been listening. Joining and gender balance up a little bit.
So one of the questions going back to the metering, could you cover the issues on compatibility of modern switch modes with electronic energy meters? Is that something that I don't know who's best to answer?
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's a really interesting question, actually. And I saw it on the questions that came through before the session as well. I mean, I guess the first example of that we've had to deal with is the Tesla Powerwalls and the compatibility issues with energy meters that probably quite a few listeners and viewers have seen. Now, we found that as a particular issue with one specific meter and only in very certain circumstances. And we kind of nailed it down to a difference between EMC standards that devices have to go through for CE compliance and the way in which meters are certified for mid-compliance testing. And we actually only found it was one meter that was affected from one manufacturer. So it's quite a rare kind of unique scenario. But when you start to get into kind of complex electronics, yes, you can get all sorts of peculiar things going on. So my answer to that is, if there is a device that somebody thinks, is this going to cause an issue with the meter? Let us know, because I can look at the data and I can start to get involved and frequently do and help advise on that. I don't want to kind of say, oh no, it's not going to be compatible with the meter, we're not going to be able to solve it, don't switch to us and all the rest of it. I think those are the sort of issues we need to find out about and to be able to work with the industry and fix and solve.
Awesome. And how's the best way? I mean, obviously our Tesla owners are fairly technical. How do people do that?
Well, I mean, there's one email address that comes directly to me, either my personal email address, which I think quite a few people do find, or agile@octopus.energy. That's the team email address, but I frequently respond to that email address.
And Rebecca, could you give us
there's a special one tonight which we've set up as well.
Okay, awesome. We can maybe pop that in the chat afterwards if not. And Rebecca, can you give us any insight into the number of customers that have then gone on to recommend Octopus to a friend? Is that, I don't know how public or secretive that information is. Is there any rough idea?
Well, we're I mean, we were lucky enough to have a huge amount of customer love, people talking about us to their friends and family, and I think about I think it's around 50% of customers who join us directly, i.e. not through a third party, come via a recommendation from friends and family, which is incredibly powerful, really. And it actually means it puts kind of more pressure on us, really, because you only recommend someone generally, in any walk of life that you kind of trust and you think they'll do a good job. And actually, it's quite a big commitment for a customer to do that. But then it puts a lot of onus on us to make sure that we kind of deliver on that trust that someone's joining, thinking, oh, these guys are really good. So you're already kind of starting from a higher place, as it were. But yeah, and we do see that go up and up. Even when we, occasionally we get things wrong. We don't always get everything right, but we always try and work really hard to fix anything that we do get wrong. And we keep striving at it. And it seems to pay off. People like to talk about us.
And presumably that also costs you less long term. You're not pushing massive amounts of extra budget on adverts, that sort of thing. Is that a fair assessment? Or?
Yeah, well, we have a referral scheme. So anybody who refers a customer to us, they get 50 quid and the new customer gets 50 quid as well. And we would rather, when we use a third party like a switching site, we have to pay them. And we'd much rather pay a customer, give it to them as a credit, than pay a third party. So we're very, very happy to kind of give that in. I mean, we're quite generous with it. We don't kind of save money by giving it to customers over third parties, but we would genuinely rather give it to customers to, make their lives a little bit easier.
I think we also love giving it to things like owners groups, right? Anywhere that people are helping each other for the right reasons is exciting beyond just a sort of traditional marketing channel like a switching site.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we have. Thanks to you guys, we've got a £70 discount that you can go for if you go for the dual fuel. All the terms and conditions are on the club's website, which is really we're thankful for that as well, because they say often at times we'll have lots of people saying, "Does anyone have any information on the top energy providers?" And Octopus seems to be like number one, number two, number three, like. So clearly you're doing something good, which is it's great to see. So what Octopus Energy products? I don't know if we touched on it briefly, but are there any energy products that you're really looking forward to, or maybe that have been cancelled or failed? Is there any others?
Rebecca, can you think of any that cancelled or failed?
Any that cancelled or failed? I mean, I'd love to say yes, because I think that it's good to fail. It's good to be trying loads of new things and some things not work. I mean, certainly we have to tweak things, and we work very iteratively. We don't spend. When I've worked in businesses, kind of big corporate businesses, where you're literally spending kind of 2 years, bringing something to life, and by the time you get it out the bloody door, it's like a fraction of what it was at the beginning, and it's just nearly killed everyone doing it. So we work fast. So our tracker tariff, which was the precursor to Agile, where the rate changes every day based on wholesale. Before, you don't have to have a smart meter to have it, and we launched it I think 3 years ago, and I think we launched it in 5 days. We just said, we just need to build this thing, and we put a crack team together, data scientists, designers, front enders, back enders, and we just launched it. And that's something we try and continue to do. It takes us a little bit longer now with some things, but generally, the tariffs that we launch are beta tariffs. They're innovative. We have a great community, including this community, who take them up and will kind of bear with us a little bit if something wobbles a bit, because they appreciate what we're trying to do. And I think that's so important for us to have that group of innovators out there who will take these tariffs and use them in the way that they're meant to be used. Phil, I don't know if you had anything that's failed. I'm going to,
No, I'm kind of scratching my head with the same question. I think it's the same point. We haven't had specific failures. I mean, I can think of one smart plug that we promoted and we didn't get very far with it, and we stopped that. There was a smart thermostat that we had an offer with, which we did and was successful. We had a few of those, but nothing that's gone seriously wrong or bad, and we've had to pull it out or whatever. No.
I did love EcoPlug that never really took off.
Yeah.
That was a little finger that could turn on a washing machine. So when Agile was cheap, right? But it turned out it was a little bit flaky, but it was great fun.
We had a lot of fun with it at the hackathon back in May 2018, because they had it attached to it was a dryer, wasn't it, that was brought into the hackathon event, and they were talking to Alexa and asking it to turn the dryer on if the price was below 12 pence or whatever. It's cool. Yeah.
So that actually comes directly onto the next question, actually. So when Agile does have its plunge pricing, is it really green to use as much as possible? Putting on a electric heater overnight simply to use more kilowatt hours?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's really abusing the tariff to that extent to start to use electricity in that way. It's not the purpose of it, but
yeah, I don't mind. I mean, at the end of the day, look, if it's excess green electricity, it's not causing any carbon emissions, and National Grid will be paying someone else to take it otherwise. So, frankly, look, in the future energy system, that's the way we help keep it balanced. Problem with electricity is at any moment in time, you've got to take as much out of the system as you're putting in. So if what we're putting in is zero marginal cost, zero carbon, fill your boots.
And I guess obviously, ideally, you want to put it into a battery or a car or something like that if you can, rather than just putting a heater on and opening the window. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, look. By the way, look, we lose money when people do that, because at the moment, the way that Ofgem, National Grid, whatever the networks charges for their wires, we still having to pay to access them, which is bonkers, but a separate issue. But the underlying physics, it kind of makes sense.
Greg, did you cover the 2 May bank holidays earlier?
No.
So I mean, those are really good examples. So if we'd had people turning on electric heaters, it kind of proved that we were influencing behaviour and consuming energy when it is particularly green. And the more that can be done, the better it is to encourage more renewable energy. So the 2 May bank holidays, there was excess wind generation. And actually what happened then was it hit the headlines on the papers. The grid was going to turn off wind generation. And that's the worst thing to do. And then again, back in November, it was one Thursday, there was not enough generation and there was too much demand. And the opposite happened, and the grid was going to pay coal-fired power stations 10 times the normal rate to turn on. Now, if people, and we can show that people are consuming energy when the actual right plunges and so on, even if it is running electric heaters and things like this, we're still showing to the rest of the industry pricing works, changes behavior. Let's bring it on and do more of that. Yeah.
And why would you turn off a wind turbine as opposed to say to a power plant, can you lower it down? Is that a wind turbine lower in the chain? So they say, well, you've got to do it first. How does that?
So I am not an expert on the physics, but briefly, National Grid needs to keep a certain amount of what's called inertia on the grid. So that's electricity being generated by large, heavy spinning masses. Essentially, that's because it helps balance the frequency. If you remember back to sort of GCSE or A-level physics, if people did that, if you generate electricity and put more load on it, then it will actually slow down those turbines. And that can then act as a signal to put more into the grid, to put more power in. So what happens is currently, when we have a lot of renewables on the grid, it's very hard for National Grid to maintain the inertia. So at some point, they'll be turning off renewables when they're keeping fossil fuels on. There are other things, like, for example, there's not yet big enough kind of transmission capacity from, for example, some of the wind generation in Scotland to bits of England to deal with those times. We've got very heavy wind in Scotland, but maybe not so much Scottish demand, as an example. So, there'll be a lot of reasons underneath it why it'll get turned off. But what we need to do is work hard to prove that a renewable system can work. All the ways in which people react to Agile, in particular, are proving that. And that helps the investment case to make an ever more renewable system with consumers as an active participant.
Oh, yeah. And is there any plans within Octopus to talk with the Tesla API for charging the car?
Phil?
Well, the only API that I know of at the moment is not a private API that's published by Tesla themselves. So I've seen that there is people who have reverse engineered an API in order to be able to apply controls to it. But I don't want to touch reverse engineered APIs like that before we apply controls to them. But if Tesla give us access to a private API that we can do that, definitely possible.
Yeah, I think lots and lots of people are desperate for Tesla to sort out the API stuff. I think there'll be lots of apps that are very happy because at the moment, like you say, they're all very much unofficial, which is not great from a security point of view at the very least, especially when you've got 100 grand sitting on your driveway. Yeah,
it's a mixture of the security, the reliability, the performance of that API. Because you've got an expensive piece of kit that you don't want to really affect in an invalid way.
And so what's the feedback been on the Tesla tariff? Can we give some more?
Rebecca, are you closest to that?
Phil's place as well. I think extremely positive. So we've brought out 2 different versions now. The first one where you need the EV, and the second one, and we brought that out initially just in certain GSPs in certain regions, and then we rolled it out nationally. And then we brought out a version where you don't have a car, so you don't have to have the EV at a slightly different rate. And I think, incredibly well received. I think one of the problems with the early days is that we were kind of asked, why isn't it everywhere? And it's, we were working very, very carefully with Tesla. It was a very new thing that they were doing. It was quite a delicate balancing operation to create a prop that worked really well. But I think now that, it's ramping up, it's really exciting to be able to offer something so different to our other tariffs as well. And I think, the feedback that we seem to see from customers directly and the forums is that, people are really, really welcoming it.
And I'm sure we've got a few listeners that have that tariff as well. So if you have any questions on that tariff in particular, fire away with the questions. When do we think Octopus are going to have a massive Tesla battery like in Australia?
First of all, look, we're in awe of what Tesla are doing in batteries and generally in energy. So we're always chatting to Tesla about what we might do. But I think, when it comes to sticking a big battery on the UK grid, first of all, I think the battery that we have at Arsenal, or have worked with Arsenal to procure from other people, actually underneath it has some Tesla tech. So we do work on some fairly hefty batteries with Tesla. But I actually think Tesla will be able to stick a big battery on the UK grid without us, sadly. But we would love to work with them on a whole pile of products.
So we briefly touched on agile pricing. A question come in, so maybe we can just quickly answer that. What is the real reason for the high peak?
And the real reason for the high peak is lack of wind. I think there's something called the winter anticyclone in the UK, which is when we'll often get several days of non-windy weather. On top of that, and by the way, from time to time when it's particularly high, look at our Twitter feed, because our energy procurement experts will write about what's going on. But Phil, is there anything else to add to that?
No, I mean, you're right. My connection is breaking up a little bit, but yes, it's a combination of how much wind there is, but also as the nights are getting longer and we're using more electricity to heat, to cook, lighting, and so on, then demand has changed.
Yeah,
perfect. Thank you.
And I think we always, whenever there's a peak, we always get the odd person on Twitter, as I'm sure many of you people, many people have seen, who get stressed about that. And I think the answer always is, what's really nice, that we don't often have to answer, because people will jump in and say, the agile tariff is a tariff for the long term. It's for innovators who kind of accept some slight peaks and troughs in demand, but overall, customers are seeing incredible savings. In fact, even in peak days, it's kind of, it's peaky today and it's 18p, and it's like, well, that's kind of roughly there or there about what you'd see elsewhere, and it's very, 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 very low. So we always have a little bit of a wobble from very few, but the majority of people totally get what it's about and do stick with it.
Perfect. On the Tesla plan, do you need to set up the Powerwall in a special way? What's that process of, I've clicked the button, I'm interested, I want it, to actually it being turned on and working? How does that work?
I think Jeremy answered in the chat, actually.
Can
you see that? Jeremy McMull. Thanks, Jeremy.
But yeah, if you could maybe just go into a bit more detail for that.
Sure. Yeah. So Tesla actually applied the controls to the battery system. They are doing it according to the price signals that we give, so quite a similar profile as the Agile import and export tariff. So they are using the battery to reflect what's going on in terms of renewable energy through the day. So if you've got a Tesla Powerwall, you will probably see that the controls that you might normally have are no longer accessible, because Tesla have taken control of it.
Got you. And what was the reaction, Greg, from the industry when you launched that product?
You mean Agile or Tesla?
Well, both actually, but Tesla primarily, yeah. Yeah,
so I think it's really interesting. The rest of the energy industry don't actually give us much in the way of feedback on it. We are ploughing a fairly lone furrow there. There've been a lot of copies of our EV tariff, so you'll notice a clustering from the former large incumbents around sort of a 5p overnight rate, or kind of charging period. Although often there'll be a watch out on the standing charge, or the fact you've got to bundle gas with it, very expensive, or the daily rate. But no criticism. But there's focus there. But on the truly dynamic stuff, the Tesla tariffs, the Go Faster, which is the one that you got different lengths charging slots overnight, or Agile, there's very little. They're really fascinating. For me, I think these are the opportunity for us to talk to the government and show the way in which customers respond. And I love hearing people talking about, kind of how they feel about when it's peaky or when it goes negative, or what it's kind of how they're moving their consumption around, because the whole purpose here is you can't find out through consumer research what people are going to do. We make it a real product people really buy with real money, and then we get real world kind of learning. By the way, can I just quickly pick up this? Unfortunately, I can't scroll my chat. I think I'm probably using an outdated browser.
No, it doesn't actually scroll, bizarrely.
I've been trying that for ages. If you thought I was distracted, anyway. But I think it was Brian Gladden, I think, asked just briefly, thought I was a bit dismissive of the central control. And I apologise if that sounds dismissive. It's not dismissive, but I think it is the opportunity for us to say, look, energy used to have 135 large coal and gas power stations, plus a few nukes that we could turn on and off to meet our demand. As we move to millions of individual generators through solar panels, storage devices with batteries like Powerwall and Powervault, vehicle to grid, going from your car onto the grid, big shiftable loads like the ability to move the time a car consumes, and so on. So those solutions don't work well, and what we need definitely to do is to have price signals that enable equipment automatically or with human intervention to respond to that in order to balance what's going on in generation, which is kind of the intermittency of renewables. But if we get the tech doing that and we're able to, it's a complex system, and like all complex systems, you need delegated authority down to the right level to make it work. So in a complex system, the delegated authority down at the device, the street, the substation, and so on, is what will make the renewable transition cheap. If we don't follow that, if we're purely central plan, we can't do it. But there's no reason why they wouldn't work in parallel for a long period of time. So I don't think it's a big risky cutover. It's merely an exhortation for a more dynamic distributed system.
Perfect. So we've got a couple of questions about Go Faster. Would you consider offering the Go Faster options to the Tesla owners group?
So the Go Faster tariff, actually, this was one of the research projects that we set up with UKPN. So when you look at the original, we call it Go Classic, as I refer to it sometimes, that's got a 5 rate between midnight and 4:30. And what that means is that we see large numbers of cars will start to charge from midnight. And of course, that has its own impact on the grid, seeing suddenly we're putting a whole load of load on the grid. So the research element of that was to see, again, kind of behavior change. What happens if you offer customers different versions of the tariff? So do you start at midnight or 11:30 or 10:30 or 9:30 and so on? But actually also, what happens if you don't say to customers, right, which one do you want? That's it, you've got it. But actually say there's a limited availability on each of these, and we'll probably put you on the nearest one depending on what's available. And so that's what we did, and we invited several hundred customers to it, and it's still a running tariff. And if customers email on the 2 email addresses that we mentioned, so Agile or the TOG email address, then you can still get onto that tariff. And we actually saw that 90% of the customers that I dealt with running that tariff were quite happy to moved on to an hour later or an hour earlier, because they recognised that what we were trying to do was smooth out and balance how the energy was being consumed, rather than everybody all turning on at midnight, because that's what Go Classic happened to do. But it's still an active tariff. It's not on the website, so you have to send me an email and I'll set somebody up on it, and it's available.
It's a special little one, and this is what we try and do all the time. It's like actually, showing and proving through actually, normal customers using these tariffs that people do take their consumption and do use them at different times. And actually, as Phil was talking about earlier with our May trials, not just in innovators, although they're really important, but actually kind of normal humans as well. As we would talk about it, like anybody kind of gets it. So that we'll always be doing trials like that.
Perfect. And does your input data on the Tesla tariff primarily include the forecasting of solar for the following day or the day?
It essentially does, because it's a similar input to the Agile tariff. So it's used in the wholesale market, which is therefore based on wind generation, solar generation as well. Yeah, it's not divided out between wind and solar, but it's the overall wholesale market.
Sorry, Phil, but I think also Tesla's algorithm takes into account the solar generation of the household in question as well.
Oh, yeah. If you've got if you're not using the Tesla tariff itself, but yes, the Powerwall is also taking into account your own solar generation as well on the property. Yeah.
When or will we ever see an account without a standing charge?
Well, we could do it today. In fact, there are 2 energy companies that do. But the reality is that it's almost impossible to make those better value than ones with a standing charge. Even the ones that exist have got a minimum consumption level, and if you work it through, you'd be better off with the standing charge. And the reason for that is there's a whole load of fixed costs just for having a connection that we have to pay. So we have to pay meter rental, we have to pay a whole pile, I can't remember, a whole pile of sort of other regulated costs just because the connection exists. And so that typically gets put into standing charge. And what that means is then the marginal rate for each unit is lower. And for almost anyone, that's going to be a better combo.
Perfect. So in the office, who drives an electric car?
I tell you what, we're probably dominant electric among our management team. So among our top 13 managers, let me think, me, CFO, Fiona, Tim, who else? Sir Ruben. I mean, shed loads. There'll be more than that. I'm just having a mental block. But I think Rebecca, you're in the queue, and then we've got quite a lot who don't drive. So I think of those who've got a car, the majority are electric.
Cool. What could Ofgem do to open up the supply-based system, e.g., regulated costs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing really is that today every electron carries a poll tax and a sin tax. So there's a whole load of fixed charges, and there's a whole load of kind of green taxes, even on green electrons. So you know, if we buy electrons on the outgoing tariff from someone's solar generation, we'll be paying maybe 5p a kilowatt hour. By the time it gets next door, it's travelled through 10 meters of wire, it'll cost about 14p per kilowatt hour, and the vast majority of that are those fixed and policy costs. So what we need to do is get to a world where instead of having fixed costs, you've got marginal costs for accessing the wires. You know, so if we're using the networks when they're empty, a bit like using a spare capacity in hotels or trains or planes, it should be cheap. And that would mean you could take, when you've got very low cost generation, you can send it down low cost wires, and then we can make the most of that renewable power. And then we really need to move away from a world where the green taxes are going on green electricity, and instead they're going on either dirty electricity or dirty gas, or some other way of freeing up green electrons from taxes.
Perfect. Good. So we're coming to about 10 minutes off now. So if anyone has any final questions, please pop them in the chat. So another one.
By the way, Will, I'm sorry. I think I'd said it'd be great if we could finish by 8 because there's a couple of the commitments. But frankly, this is so interesting. If you want to stay and people want to stay for a while, there've been so many questions. I'm happy to hang around if that helps. It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, we're pretty easy. Has Octopus considered how they work around customers in smart meter WAN black spots to leverage time of use tariffs? There's tools such as Emon Pi or Emon CMS, for example. Any information on those?
Yeah, look, I mean, perhaps frustratingly, but the smart meter communications infrastructure was largely defined probably more than a decade ago, I think. So what you've got is in the southern region, which I think is from the Midlands of England down, and the northern region, which is from there up, including Scotland. Then you've got 2 different communications networks. And essentially, those networks hard code send the data to the Capita-run data communications company, which then sends it on to companies like us. If it hasn't gone through that network, then we can't use it for metering. Now, I say that SMETS1 meters, which people may be familiar with, kind of predated this network, and they send us the data via a SIM card. But we're no longer allowed to install those. At least if we do, they don't count towards our smart rollout obligations. So it's really difficult to offer workarounds. Now, what is happening is as the mainstream sort of SMETS2 meter program is getting to scale and really beginning to work well most of the time, we're beginning to be able to work on all the kind of harder stuff, and that include ones where you don't have good coverage, and there'll be increasingly solutions to deal with that. people who are in certain kinds of blocks of flats. And also I noticed that I think there was a question about three-phase as well. Three-phase SMETS2 is kind of where we're in test at the moment. So we've got some customers who got them in test, but they're going to be, I think we'll have volume of three-phase SMETS2 in Q1. So, that world is rapidly evolving, and that will help solve some of those WAN black spots and other kind of difficult cases.
Perfect. And will customers ever be allowed to export from the Powerwall to the grid without being on any form of the Tesla tariff or similar product?
Phil?
Yeah, so I believe you can. I think within the Tesla app itself, you can set whether you're balancing against your home demand or whether you're exporting, and you can set some schedule capability on there. The bit that's kind of missing, which is frustrating for me actually, because I love it as well, is an API so that you could connect that up to the agile tariffs, the import tariff and the export tariff particularly. So you're getting it to export specifically when the export rates are particularly high, i.e. the grid needs more renewable energy than you might have stored from earlier in the day.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Greg, on a day-to-day, are you maintaining, creating new projects, simply going on the news to speak to the news? What's your day like?
Well, look, I'm really rigorous about time management actually. So every day I have 4 hours between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. which are scheduled to have no meetings. Now, occasionally something will interfere with that, but that really gives me a lot of time to spend with the team talking about these kind of things. And so I think one of the things that really helps drive innovation at Octopus is the relentless focus from the people you see around this table, including me, and a whole bunch of others on learning every day. What are we learning from what our customers are doing, from what we're seeing in the physics of the grid and the economics of the grid, that we can then use to drive faster towards new products and services, new communications that will enable us to decarbonize whilst cutting costs. So that's kind of my focus, and that's what I spend most of my time doing.
Perfect. And on the back end for those ideas, that sort of thing, how do you do it? Have you got a custom system, or are you using Messenger or Slack or something? How does that work from your business point of view?
We are big on Slack.
Big on, yeah.
But I looked at my phone. I looked at my phone the other day, and I think I got 63 phone calls I'd made before 6 p.m. So I think we're particularly big on just talking to each other relentlessly to kind of drive ideas. I'll tell you one thing that's great about Slack is every single member of our team that speaks to customers are on Slack channels with Rebecca and Phil and others, where if you speak to one of our team and there is something that we're communicating badly or getting systemically wrong, I can't guarantee it will get fixed immediately, but it will go straight to the senior manager who's responsible for that area of the business. So, Rebecca, I don't know, if you've got any examples of that.
Yeah, we get a kind of, a few dozen a day, like literally in these different channels, direct contact from customers. So whether I'm just having a look at ones through today, it was like actually we weren't very clear on how to read some of the new kind of smart meters. So we've updated FAQs, a couple of typos got flagged, so nothing major today, but actually, it's kind of constant. It's a constant way that people are filtering through what customers are saying, and whether that's small things or big things, if something's broken, it gets to us really, really quickly. It's a constant watch, and we also go in and answer emails as well. Phil in particular looks after kind of dozens and dozens of customers a day, particularly specialised smart power replacement as well. My team in marketing and product development all blitz. We call having an email blitz twice a week where we go in and we answer emails from customers, and they're not on marketing stuff or product stuff. We literally go in and everybody finds emails from customers and responds to them as a customer, as an operations specialist, so that everybody knows what kind of things people are saying, and everyone can use our systems, and everyone has that kind of finger on the pulse of customers as well. That's totally critical for us.
Awesome, yeah, and that feedback, that instant feedback you'll see must be superb. What's advice would you give to someone that wants to transition away from gas heating? Not quite your expertise, I would have thought, but it sort of blends in, doesn't it? It's
really important to us. We're beginning to establish more and more team members and expertise in decarbonised heating. I think for next year, it will be as big a focus for us as electric vehicles have been. But I think most important thing will be, if possible, heat pumps are the key, because of that multiplier effect that a kilowatt hour of electricity leads to 2.5 to 4 kilowatt hours of heat. At the moment, it's a bit of a cottage industry. So, most heat pump installations, you're getting kit that's not being manufactured at scale, so it's a bit expensive, with an installer who will do a fairly bespoke job. And you may need some work done on your home, although frankly, I think that's often overstated. But, getting your installation up to sort of scratch, and maybe having the odd radiator enlarged will typically work for a lot of households, but it is a bit bespoke. The other bit is dynamic tariffs. I think there's an article on New Scientist. If you look at my Twitter feed or the Octopus Twitter feed, you'll see a link to an article on New Scientist which had a graph of one of our customers' use of a heat pump on the Agile tariff. Now, I think Agile plus EV plus decarbonised heating is a really exciting combo.
Awesome, perfect. The Tesla tariff and Agile, how long do we think it's going to be a product? Will it be forever? Do we think it's fairly short-lived? It's really that test phase, or is it just up to the stats? I think it's the future. I want to keep doing it at scale. The one thing is, it will be great if we have some of those policy changes I described. At the moment, we proxy for a dynamic network charging regime on these tariffs, in order to bring them to people and prove they work. I think now they're so well proven, they hold the key to cheap decarbonisation. We should do them. This should be the norm for people who like them. And will we ever see a smart meter display with the actual Agile prices? A small little box or something? Or... Yeah,
I hope we will. In SMETS 1 world, which is the kind of the old smart metering world, where we started with Agile, and indeed all the dynamic tariffs, we could only get the data once a day. It cost a fortune to get it in real time. So what we do is once a day we get a dump of the previous 24 hours data. We've carried that over into SMETS 2 world, but I think we'll be able to open it up to more frequent data to us. Now that'll mean that at some point, it might be a year or two away, but we'll be able to probably give you real-time data online, on the app or on another device, and indeed open up via the API so people use all the third-party stuff will get it. For the in-home display, it's a little bit more tricky, because the in-home displays as they were defined today were really designed to mimic old metering systems. They're not treated as a time series, they're treated as a series of rates. So you'll have rate 1, rate 2, rate 3, rate 4, and trying to bung 48 different rates into them every 24 hours has definitely proven to be quite complex. We're working on it, but I can't promise it.
Got it. There was a couple of questions about sort of response times, and I think it was Paul Davis that's pulled that up. So on your website, I believe, is that right, Rebecca? You can.
It is. So yeah. So first of all, I think there was a message from a Jonathan saying we hadn't got back to him. We've got a couple of people with your name, Jonathan. So please email tog@octopus.energy and we'll have a look, pick it up. We just shared the link, but we show our medium email response times, our daily ones on our website. So I think we're currently 22 hours, 17 minutes on average to reply to emails. It's actually a bit longer than we like. We like to get back within a few hours. So I think if you've been waiting longer than that, please again do drop us a nudge to the TOG, the special TOG email address. We are a bit quicker on Twitter. Because Greg and I read everything on Twitter and we've got a real crack team on it. Twitter is generally used by businesses as the kind of place to go. So that's why we'll always be a little bit quicker there. But yeah, generally we try to be quite transparent about what our wait times are.
I was going to say, because I think the idea of the email is for most customers, drop us a query on email and you'll typically get it. I know these are Tesla owners. I was about to say, you drop it when you're getting on the bus in the morning, and when you get on the bus in the evening on your way back home, you'll probably have a response. That's the goal. So you're not having to. Typically, most energy queries are not urgent. That means the team can buffer it, rather than having to pay to have people just standing by waiting for the next one, which is what you have to do with phones. The other thing is you'll find the beginning of them every month is slower, because the vast majority of people do their direct debit and stuff like that for the end of the month, beginning of the month. And that's when they all get in touch. So actually, a bit like Agile, there's certain times it's really good to contact. And, because we run these kind of multi-skilled teams, typically what you'll get is we don't just have a triage person. You should have someone who will solve your problem most of the time, not always, but that does mean sometimes you'll wait for them. The other thing I'd say is, again, the torture test for everything we do is the people here. They're the most knowledgeable, engaged people in the whole of energy. Now, we've got 1.8 million customers who are on vanilla tariffs like every other company do. And we've got a few tens of thousands on all this interesting stuff. But, I looked at one point, I think Agile customers were at one point 10 times more likely to contact us than other customers. And the queries are harder. So when you email us on for example, Agile or Tesla-specific questions, Powerwall questions, often the team will have to go and find an answer somewhere because it's complicated. And that does mean often that'll be a bit slower.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Could you cover the Octopus Juice network? I mean, I must admit, I only saw about it today. I'd completely gone past me. Just a quick introduction and maybe how that's going to go forward, that sort of thing.
You know what? I drive a Tesla, and I don't have at-home charging. So public charging has been my life for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And of course, the supercharger network is amazing. But as soon as you dare step outside that, you discover that, if you're not a member of each different network, it can be a real pain. So we came up with the Juice network, which is a single payment card that currently works on, I think, 6 or 7 networks. By the new year, I think it'll be on 12 or 13. And when you pay for your energy on that, so you're charging on that, it'll go on your Octopus Energy home bill. It'll be billed at whatever rate you would have paid on that device. And there's also going to be an app soon as well. So increasing the idea is it's like a roaming service for charging. And I think it helps unlock the scary thing for us Tesla owners, which is non-Tesla networks.
Now you've actually described it, I do remember it a little while ago. And you've obviously expanded it, I think, quite a bit since then. So that's great to hear. So is that a one fixed tariff, just to whenever you tap, or does it vary on the network that you're?
Yeah, it will vary by network. So all we're really doing there is the network. There's no markup from us on that. It's just a service, really. I hope over time it becomes commercially interesting. But all it is whatever the network tell us the charges, that's what we charge you, and then we pay them, from our systems. So we're kind of reconciling it all. But from a convenience point of view, it means you've got a single card to use all the networks.
Got it. And is that open to the public, or is that just your energy customers? How does that work?
You know what? I actually don't know because I've never been not a customer. Phil, do you know the answer? Rebecca, do you know the answer?
No, I don't actually. I've got my Juice network card.
No. I asked that. Yeah. Let me see if I can find out.
Yeah. Well, I think I've just gone red for not realising the answer. If we have any sort of more questions, we're going to wrap up fairly soon. I know. Thank you, Phil, and everyone else for offering to stay a little bit longer. Someone says, are you looking for early adopters for ASHP and GSHP developments? I don't know what they stand. Air source heat pump and ground source.
Okay, yeah. Ground source, yes.
Yeah.
Rebecca, you are, aren't you?
Yes, actually. We're looking at some really exciting stuff in this space, as Greg alluded to. And heat pumps is an area where we think we've got the knowledge across hardware and software and, energy innovation to make a real difference. So yes, please do. If you think you might be in the market over the next few months for a heat pump and you've got, you're interested in trialing something new, again, drop us an email to tog@octopus.energy and we will add you to that list.
Perfect. That sounds very interesting.
I saw a question about outgoing and fit. Do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Yes. So I think it was effectively, can you still export on Agile with the fit?
That's right. So the old feed-in tariff fit that ended in April last year, and then the Smart Export Guarantee came into effect on the 1st of January this year. Now, we launched our export tariff 1st of April 2019, so 9 months ahead of SEG to cover that gap between the feed-in tariff. When you apply for an export tariff, a measured export tariff like our outgoing Agile and so on, you can't receive payments under both the feed-in tariff export and the measured export. So you keep the generation part of the feed-in tariff, but you lose the export measured part of the feed-in tariff. And often if somebody's got like a 2011 feed-in tariff system, they're probably receiving 40 or 50 pence per kilowatt hour generation, but the export part of FIT was I think it's about 5.5 pence at the moment. So you'd end that bit, keep the FIT generation, and then go onto our export tariff. And we managed that whole process, and this is why the export tariffs are quite difficult, because we've got so many steps to go through to ensure that's done properly.
Oh, yeah. So you obviously primarily for consumers, but you also, if I'm right in thinking, do business tariffs as well. Do you think businesses really care about the environment and going green, or do you think it's just an appearance because they want to tick a box for 2020 that lots of people are talking about renewable energy? We need to sort it.
I think businesses are actually leading the way. It's really interesting that we definitely see more as a percentage, business customers kind of caring more about how green the energy than consumers, which is understandable. You know, businesses spend more on it, have got more time to think about it, and they'll care about their reputation.
It's not